At Easter lunch, Grandma handed out envelopes to everyone but me. I smiled politely, snapped a quick selfie, and left quietly. An hour later, my uncle called crying, begging me to delete my post. My name is Haiti, and I'm 28 years old. This story is about how one moment of pettiness from my grandmother led to the complete unraveling of years of family secrets and lies. Let me start from the beginning. My family has always been complicated, but I thought blood was thicker than water. You know, my grandmother, Margaret Thompson, has been the matriarch of our family for as long as I can remember. She's 83 years old, sharp as a tack, and has this way of making you feel like you're either her favorite person in the world or absolute garbage. There's no middle ground with Grandma Margaret. I grew up believing I was special to her. She used to tell me I was her little star when I was younger, always praising my grades, my artwork, my anything really. But things started changing when I hit my teenage years. I began noticing how differently she treated me compared to my cousins, especially after certain family events. The shift became really obvious after I graduated college. I was the first person in my family to get a degree, which you'd think would make everyone proud. My parents, Linda and Robert Mitchell, were over the moon. My dad especially, since he never got the chance to go to college himself. But Grandma Margaret's reaction was cold. She smiled and said congratulations, but it felt hollow, like she was going through the motions. Meanwhile, my cousins Jake and Emma Rodriguez, my Uncle Tony's kids, could do no wrong in her eyes. Jake dropped out of high school and has been bouncing between construction jobs for years. Emma got pregnant at 19 and is now a single mom working part-time at a grocery store. Don't get me wrong, I'm not judging them for their life choices, but it was confusing how Grandma Margaret would constantly praise them while treating my achievements like they were nothing special. Then there's my other uncle, David Thompson, Grandma's youngest son. He's always been her golden child, even though he's 45, and has never held a steady job. He's been married 3 times, has kids he barely sees, and somehow always needs money that Grandma Margaret is happy to provide. But me, I got a stable job as a marketing coordinator, bought my own apartment, and am completely financially independent. You'd think that would count for something. The weirdness in family dynamics really came to a head about 3 years ago, at Christmas. Grandma Margaret gave everyone presents except me. When I asked about it, she said she forgot to get me anything, but would make it up to me later. She never did. That's when I started to suspect there was something deeper going on, but I couldn't figure out what. My mom would always make excuses for her. You know how Grandma is, sweetheart. She's getting older. Sometimes she forgets things. But I knew this wasn't about forgetting. This was intentional. The way she'd light up when Jake or Emma walked into a room compared to the polite but distant way she'd greet me made it crystal clear. I tried talking to my dad about it, but he'd just get uncomfortable and change the subject. My mom would get defensive and accuse me of being too sensitive or reading too much into things. So I stopped bringing it up and just tried to accept that for whatever reason, I wasn't Grandma Margaret's favorite anymore. But this Easter was different. This Easter was the final straw that broke everything wide open. The family always gathers at Grandma Margaret's house for Easter lunch. It's this big traditional thing she's been doing for decades. She lives in this beautiful old Victorian house that's been in the family forever, and she takes great pride in hosting these elaborate meals. The dining room table gets set with her good china. There are fresh flowers everywhere, and she always makes this incredible spread of food. This year, everyone was there. My parents, Uncle Tony, and his wife Maria with Jake and Emma, Uncle David with his current girlfriend Jennifer and me. We were all sitting around the dining room table having finished the main course when Grandma Margaret stood up and said she had something special for everyone. She disappeared into the kitchen and came back with a stack of white envelopes. My heart started beating a little faster because I remembered the Christmas present situation. But I told myself this would be different. This was Easter, and she'd specifically said she had something for everyone. One by one, she handed out the envelopes. "Tony, this is for you and Maria," she said with this warm smile. "And Jake. Emma, here are yours." She moved around the table, giving envelopes to Uncle David and his girlfriend, then to my parents. I sat there waiting, watching everyone else open their envelopes. Inside each envelope was a check. I couldn't see the amounts from where I was sitting, but I could tell by everyone's reactions that they were substantial. Jake actually gasped and said, "Grandma, this is too much." Emma started crying and hugged her. Even Uncle David, who's usually pretty cool about money, since he's always getting it from her, looked surprised by the amount. But there I was, sitting at the end of the table with no envelope in front of me. Grandma Margaret had made her way around to everyone except me. She looked right at me, and for a moment, I thought maybe she was saving mine for last, maybe building up to something special. Instead, she sat back down and said, "Well, I hope everyone enjoys their Easter gift. It's so wonderful to have family together like this." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The conversations around the table were buzzing with excitement as people talked about their checks, but I just sat there in complete shock. This wasn't forgetting to get me a Christmas present. This was deliberately excluding me from what was clearly a significant family gift right in front of everyone. My mom caught my eye from across the table and gave me this look that I knew meant don't make a scene. My dad was staring down at his plate, clearly uncomfortable, but not willing to speak up. Nobody else seemed to notice or care that I'd been left out. I had two choices in that moment. I could make a scene, demand to know why I was excluded, and probably ruin Easter for everyone. Or I could handle this with grace and dignity, even though I was dying inside. I chose grace, but with a twist. I smiled politely like nothing was wrong. I even congratulated Jake and Emma on their gift. Then I said, "You know what, Grandma? This has been lovely, but I just remembered I have some work to catch up on at home. Would it be okay if I headed out a little early?" Grandma Margaret looked almost relieved. "Of course, dear. Thank you for coming." I hugged everyone goodbye, still smiling, still acting like everything was perfectly fine. But before I left, I asked if I could take a quick family photo. For my Instagram, I explained. I love documenting our family gatherings. Everyone gathered around the dining room table with all those white envelopes clearly visible. Grandma Margaret was beaming in the center, surrounded by her family and all the evidence of her Easter generosity. I took several photos, making sure to get different angles, and then I took one final selfie of myself smiling in front of the group. "Perfect," I said cheerfully. "These will be great memories." I left Grandma Margaret's house and drove home in complete silence. I wasn't even crying yet. I was just numb. But by the time I got to my apartment, the reality of what had happened hit me like a freight train. I sat on my couch and just sobbed. Why was I being treated like this? What had I done wrong? Was it because I was successful? Because I didn't need money like some of the others? Was I being punished for being independent? The questions were spinning through my head, and I couldn't come up with any answers that made sense. After I cried it out, I got angry. Really angry. And that's when I decided to do something about it. I opened up Instagram and started crafting my post. I chose the group photo where you could clearly see all the envelopes on the table, and I wrote a caption that was honest but not mean-spirited. Easter lunch with the family. Grandma surprised everyone with generous Easter gifts today. So grateful for family traditions, even when they remind you exactly where you stand. Happy Easter, everyone. Rabbit emoji. 2 hearts emoji. Family ham. Easter. Reditions #grateful memories. It was perfect. To anyone who didn't know the full story, it would just look like a nice family post. But anyone who looked closely at the photo and read between the lines of my caption would understand exactly what happened. The phrase, "even when they remind you exactly where you stand," was doing a lot of heavy lifting, but it wasn't technically saying anything mean about anyone. I posted it and put my phone away. I wasn't expecting anything dramatic to happen. I just wanted to document the moment and maybe let my friends know in a subtle way what I was dealing with. But social media has a way of taking on a life of its own. Within an hour, I had dozens of likes and comments. Some of my friends were asking if I was okay because they could sense something was off about the post. Others were commenting about how nice the family photo looked. But then some of my family friends, people who know our family dynamics well, started commenting with things like, "Aw, Haiti, I hope you got spoiled too." And what did Grandma Margaret surprise you with? That's when things got interesting. Because I wasn't responding to those comments, people started putting 2 and 2 together. My college friend Jessica commented, "Wait, Haiti, are you in this photo? I can see everyone else, but I don't see an envelope in front of where you're sitting." And that's when the post started getting real attention. People began looking more closely at the photo, counting envelopes, counting people, and realizing that the math didn't add up. My friend Marcus, who's known my family since high school, commented, "Hold up. Did they really exclude Haiti from whatever this envelope thing was? That's messed up." The comments kept rolling in, and they were getting more and more pointed. People were asking direct questions about why I didn't have an envelope, making observations about family favoritism, and some were getting genuinely upset on my behalf. But the real explosion happened when my cousin Jake's girlfriend, Ashley, saw the post. Ashley doesn't really know the family dynamics that well, but she was at Easter lunch and she remembered the envelope situation clearly. She commented, "OMG, Haiti, I felt so bad for you today. I can't believe they left you out like that. You handled it so well, though." That comment was like lighting a match in a room full of gasoline. Now everyone knew for certain that I had been deliberately excluded from a family gift-giving moment. The comments started pouring in from friends, co-workers, acquaintances, and even some extended family members I barely knew. People were livid. Comments like, "What the hell is wrong with your family? And this is so cruel and unfair, and Haiti deserves better than this," were everywhere. Some people were sharing their own stories of family exclusion and toxicity. A few of my mom's friends even commented, asking what was going on and expressing concern. The post was getting shared too. People were screenshotting it and posting it to their own social media with captions about family drama and unfair treatment. It was spreading way beyond my immediate circle of friends and family. And that's when my phone started ringing. The first call was from my mom. "Haiti, honey, what is this post about? People are commenting some very concerning things." I played innocent. "What post, Mom?" "Oh, the Easter photo. I just thought it was a nice family picture." "Haiti, people are saying you were left out of something. They're asking me all sorts of questions about why you didn't get an envelope." "Well, Mom, I didn't get an envelope. People have eyes. They can see the photo." There was a long pause. "Honey, you know Grandma Margaret loves you. Maybe she just had a reason." "What reason would that be, Mom? What could I have possibly done to deserve being publicly humiliated in front of the entire family?" She couldn't answer that question. She tried to convince me to take the post down, saying it was causing drama and making the family look bad, but I refused. I told her I was just sharing a family photo and people were free to draw their own conclusions. The second call was from my dad. He was more direct. "Haiti, this post is causing problems. Your grandmother is upset, and frankly, so is everyone else. Can you please just delete it?" "Dad, I'm not saying anything untrue. I'm not calling anyone names or making accusations. I posted a family photo with a caption about being grateful for family traditions. If people are upset about that, maybe they should think about why." He tried to argue with me, but I held firm. The post was staying up. But the call that really made my day came about an hour after I posted. It was from Uncle Tony, and he was crying. "Haiti, please, you have to delete that post. Please." I was shocked. Uncle Tony is not an emotional man. He's this tough construction worker who I've never seen shed a tear, even at funerals. But here he was, sobbing on the phone. "Uncle Tony, what's wrong? Why are you so upset?" Because people are asking questions, Haiti. Questions we don't want to answer. What kind of questions about why you get treated differently? About why Grandma Margaret doesn't seem to like you as much? About things that happened a long time ago. My heart started racing. "What things, Uncle Tony?" There was a long silence, and then he said something that changed everything. "Haiti, there are things about our family that you don't know. Things that maybe you should know, but we all agreed it was better if you didn't. But now with this post, people are digging, and I'm afraid. Afraid of what? I'm afraid the truth is going to come out, and it's going to hurt everyone." I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. Uncle Tony, what truth? But he wouldn't tell me over the phone. Instead, he begged me to delete the post and said he'd call me tomorrow to explain everything. He was crying so hard he could barely speak. I told him I'd think about it and hung up, but I wasn't taking the post down. Not when I was this close to finally understanding what had been going on all these years. The comments on the post kept growing. By evening, there were over 200 comments, and it had been shared dozens of times. People were tagging local news stations, asking if they wanted to cover a story about family cruelty. Others were tagging family therapy accounts and asking them to weigh in on the situation. But the most interesting development was that extended family members I hadn't heard from in years were starting to comment and send me private messages. My dad's sister, Aunt Carol, who lives across the country and rarely comes to family events, sent me a long message saying she'd always wondered about the family dynamics and asking if I wanted to talk. My great Aunt Helen, Grandma Margaret's sister, commented on the post with just 3 words: "Call me tomorrow." It felt like this one post was shaking loose decades of buried family secrets. The next day brought even more calls. My mom called crying, begging me to take down the post. Uncle David called and actually screamed at me, saying I was a selfish brat who was trying to destroy the family. But those calls just made me more determined to keep the post up. The call that mattered came from Uncle Tony as promised. He asked if he could come over to talk in person, and I agreed. When he showed up at my apartment, he looked like he hadn't slept all night. His eyes were red and puffy, and his hands were shaking. We sat down in my living room, and he took a deep breath. "Haiti, what I'm about to tell you is going to be hard to hear, but you deserve to know the truth. We should have told you years ago." I braced myself. "Your dad isn't your biological father." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt dizzy and had to grip the arms of my chair to steady myself. "What?" "Your mom had an affair when she was married to your dad. You're not Robert's biological daughter." My mind was reeling. Who? Who is my biological father? Uncle Tony's face crumpled. "I am." The room started spinning. I thought I might throw up. "What?" "It happened during a really bad time in your parents' marriage. They were separated, talking about divorce. Your mom was staying with us for a few weeks while they figured things out. Maria was visiting her family in Mexico with the kids. Your mom and we made a terrible mistake. It only happened once, but it happened." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "When your parents got back together, your mom realized she was pregnant. She didn't know who the father was until you were born and started growing up. You look exactly like Emma did as a baby. Same eyes, same nose, same everything." I stared at him, trying to process this information. My Uncle Tony was my biological father. Jake and Emma weren't just my cousins, they were my half-siblings. My dad, the man who raised me and loved me and supported me through everything, wasn't actually my father. "Does Dad know?" "He figured it out when you were about 2 years old, for the same reasons we did. You look too much like my side of the family, but he chose to stay and raise you as his own daughter anyway. He loves you, Haiti. You have to believe that." "And Grandma Margaret knows?" Uncle Tony nodded. "She's known since you were little, and she's never forgiven any of us for it. Not your mom, not me, and not you. In her mind, you're a living reminder of the affair that almost broke up her son's marriage." Everything was starting to make sense. The coldness, the exclusion, the way she treated Jake and Emma so much better than me, even though I was more successful. In her mind, they were her legitimate grandchildren, and I was just the product of a shameful family secret. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because your dad didn't want you to feel different or unwanted. Because your mom was ashamed. Because I was too much of a coward to face what I'd done. Because we all convinced ourselves it was better if you never knew." I sat in silence for a long time, trying to absorb this massive revelation. Finally, I asked, "Why are you telling me now?" "Because your post is making people ask questions. People are starting to piece things together. Some of the older family friends remember the timing of everything, and they're starting to comment about it on social media." Maria saw the post and asked me directly, "If you're my daughter, I couldn't lie to her anymore." "What did you tell her?" "The truth, and now I'm probably going to lose my wife and kids, just like we always feared." I looked at this man who I'd grown up calling Uncle Tony, who was actually my biological father, who was sitting in my living room crying because decades of lies were finally catching up with him. "Uncle Tony, what am I supposed to call you now?" "You can call me whatever feels right to you, Haiti. I know I don't have the right to ask you to think of me as your father. Robert earned that title, but I want you to know that I've always loved you, even if I couldn't show it the way I wanted to." That's when I started crying too. Not sad crying, but angry crying. "Do you know what it's been like for me? Growing up thinking I wasn't good enough for this family? Thinking there was something wrong with me? Wondering why Grandma Margaret hated me so much? I know, and I'm so sorry. We thought we were protecting you, but we were just protecting ourselves." I wiped my eyes and looked at him. The post stays up. "Haiti, please." "No. I've lived with this mystery my whole life, wondering what I did wrong, wondering why I wasn't loved the same way as everyone else. Now I know it wasn't about anything I did. It was about all of you being too cowardly to deal with the consequences of your actions. Uncle Tony tried to argue, but I was done listening. I told him he needed to leave, and that if he wanted to have any kind of relationship with me going forward, he needed to stop asking me to hide the truth to make everyone else comfortable. After he left, I called my dad, my real dad, the man who chose to raise me, even when he found out I wasn't biologically his. Dad, we need to talk. I know, sweetheart. Tony called me. He told you everything. Why didn't you ever tell me? There was a long pause. Because you're my daughter, Haiti. Biology doesn't change that. I didn't want you to feel like you had to choose between Tony and me, or like you were somehow less my child because we don't share DNA. I started crying again. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry Mom cheated. I'm sorry you had to find out I wasn't yours. I'm sorry you had to deal with all of this. Honey, stop. You have nothing to apologize for. You didn't do anything wrong. You were just a baby who deserved to be loved and wanted, and that's exactly what you were. You are my daughter in every way that matters. We talked for over an hour. He explained how hard it had been over the years, watching Grandma Margaret treat me differently, but not wanting to cause more drama by confronting her. He told me how proud he was of the woman I'd become, and how he'd never regretted choosing to stay and raise me. But he also asked me to consider taking down the post, not for Grandma Margaret's sake, but for the sake of other family members who might get hurt by all the attention. I told him I'd think about it. Over the next few days, the post continued to gain momentum. It had been shared hundreds of times, and people were starting to dig into our family history. Some amateur internet detectives had figured out the timeline and were posting comments that came very close to the truth about my parentage. Local news stations had started following the story after it was tagged in so many comments. A reporter from Channel 7 actually called me and asked if I wanted to do an interview about family exclusion and emotional abuse. I declined the interview, but the fact that they were interested showed how big this had gotten. Grandma Margaret finally called me herself. Haiti, you need to take down that post immediately. Her voice was cold and commanding, the same tone she'd used with me my whole life when she was displeased about something. Hi, Grandma, how are you doing? Don't play games with me, young lady. That post is causing serious problems for this family. What problems would those be? People are asking questions, making accusations, spreading rumors. What rumors? There was a long pause. You know what rumors. Actually, I do now. Uncle Tony came clean about everything. I know why you've always treated me differently. Another pause. Then you understand why that post needs to come down. Actually, it makes me want to keep it up even more. You've spent my entire life making me feel like I wasn't good enough, like I didn't belong, like I was somehow less than everyone else in this family. And it was never about anything I did. It was about your inability to forgive a mistake that happened before I was even born. That mistake destroyed this family. No, Grandma, your reaction to it destroyed this family. You could have chosen love and forgiveness. Instead, you chose to punish an innocent child for the sins of the adults around her. I could hear her breathing getting heavier. She was angry, but for the first time in my life, I didn't care. If you don't take down that post, I will cut you out of my will completely. I laughed, actually laughed out loud. Grandma, you've made it pretty clear over the years that I'm not getting anything from you anyway. Your threats don't scare me anymore. I could tell people the truth about what you really are. Go ahead. Uncle Tony already told me everything. The truth doesn't scare me. Apparently it scares all of you, which is exactly why the post is staying up. She hung up on me. But the story doesn't end there. Because my post had done something I never expected. It had given other people permission to speak their truth, too. Great Aunt Helen called me that evening. She's Grandma Margaret's sister, and she's always been the rebel of that generation. Haiti, honey, I saw your post, and I think it's about time someone stood up to Margaret. Aunt Helen, I wasn't trying to cause trouble. You were trying to cause trouble, and good for you. That woman has been controlling this family through guilt and money for decades, and it's about time someone called her out on it. Aunt Helen told me stories about Grandma Margaret that I'd never heard. How she'd used money to manipulate family decisions for years. How she played favorites with her own children, always holding financial support over their heads to get them to do what she wanted. How she tried to break up my parents' marriage when she first found out about the affair, not because she cared about my dad's feelings, but because she was embarrassed about what people would think. Your post has people talking, Haiti. People who have been quiet for years because they were afraid of Margaret's reaction. But now they see someone standing up to her and they're finding their courage too. And it was true. Over the following days, I started getting messages from family members I barely knew, thanking me for posting that photo. People shared their own stories of how Grandma Margaret had treated them unfairly over the years, how she'd excluded them from family events or financial gifts because of some perceived slight. My second cousin Rachel, Uncle David's daughter from his first marriage, reached out to tell me how Grandma Margaret had refused to acknowledge her children because she didn't approve of Rachel's husband. My great-uncle Paul's son contacted me to say he'd been cut off from the family completely after he came out as gay in the 1990s. It turned out that my Easter experience wasn't unique. Grandma Margaret had a long history of using exclusion and financial manipulation to control family members. I just happened to be the one who documented it and shared it publicly. The most surprising message came from Maria, Uncle Tony's wife. She asked if she could meet me for coffee. I was nervous about seeing her, knowing what I now knew about Uncle Tony being my biological father, but she insisted she wanted to talk. We met at a Starbucks near my apartment, and Maria got straight to the point. "I've known about you since Jake was 5 years old," she said. "He and Emma were looking at old photo albums, and Jake pointed at a picture of you as a toddler and said, 'Why does Haiti look exactly like Emma?' I couldn't unsee it after that. I was stunned. You've known for almost 15 years? I confronted Tony about it that same day. He broke down and told me everything. I was furious, of course. We almost got divorced, but after a lot of therapy and soul-searching, I realized that you weren't the enemy. You were just an innocent child caught up in adult mistakes. Why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because Tony begged me not to. Because your parents begged me not to. Because Margaret convinced everyone that it was better for you if you never knew." She paused. "But I've watched you grow up feeling excluded and unwanted, and I felt guilty about it every single day." Maria told me that she'd been pushing Tony for years to tell me the truth. She thought I deserved to know why I was treated differently, and she believed that keeping it secret was causing more harm than good. When I saw your post, I told Tony that if he didn't tell you the truth, I would. This family's commitment to protecting everyone except you has gone on long enough. She also told me something that made my heart swell. "You know, Haiti, Jake and Emma have always felt like you were more their sister than their cousin. Even before they knew the truth, there was just something about the connection between you three." That made me think about Jake and Emma and how they must be processing all of this. I decided to reach out to them. I texted Jake first. "Hey, I don't know if your dad told you what's going on, but I think we need to talk." He called me immediately. "Haiti, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. When Dad told us yesterday, it explains so much about why you always seem different around family stuff. Are you okay with it? Finding out I'm your half-sister instead of your cousin?" "Are you kidding? This is the best news ever. It means we're even more family than we thought we were." Emma had a similar reaction when I called her. She actually cried and said, "Haiti, this explains why I've always felt so protective of you, and why I always thought Grandma Margaret was being unfair." Both of them were angry at their father for keeping the secret for so long, but they were excited about the idea of being my siblings instead of just cousins. Emma even joked, "Does this mean I can borrow your clothes now that we're sisters?" The family dynamics were shifting in ways I never could have predicted, but the person I was most worried about was my dad, Robert. I knew this whole situation had to be bringing up painful memories for him. When I called him to check in, he surprised me with his perspective. "You know, Haiti, in a weird way, I'm relieved that it's all out in the open now. I've been watching you struggle with feeling excluded from this family for years, and I felt helpless to fix it without revealing the truth. Maybe now you can finally understand that none of it was your fault." "Dad, are you sure you're okay with all of this becoming public?" "Honestly, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. I should have done it years ago, but I was too worried about keeping the peace. You're braver than I ever was." Meanwhile, my Instagram post continued to gain attention. It had reached over 1,000 shares, and the comments were in the hundreds. People were dissecting every aspect of the photo, making observations about body language, facial expressions, and family dynamics. Some comments were supportive. "Good for you for documenting this. Sometimes you need proof of how you're being treated." Others were critical. "This seems like a private family matter that shouldn't be aired on social media." But the vast majority were people sharing their own stories of family exclusion and praising me for speaking up. The story had even caught the attention of some family therapy and psychology accounts who were using it as an example of emotional abuse and family scapegoating. One licensed therapist commented with a long post about the psychological damage caused by exclusion and favoritism in families. But the most interesting development was happening within my extended family. The post had become a catalyst for people to finally speak up about years of suppressed grievances with Grandma Margaret's behavior. My cousin Rachel started her own Facebook post about how she'd been excluded from family events for over a decade. Great Uncle Paul's son created a whole Twitter thread about coming out in the conservative family and being disowned. Even some of Grandma Margaret's neighbors had started commenting about witnessing her cruel treatment of family members over the years. It was like my one Instagram post had opened the floodgates for everyone who had ever been hurt by her manipulative and exclusionary behavior. A week after the initial post, Uncle David called me. He was the one family member I hadn't heard from directly, and I was curious about his perspective since he was usually Grandma Margaret's golden child. "Haiti, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay." "Are you trying to destroy our family?" I was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer that. "Uncle David, I posted a family photo with a caption about being grateful for traditions. If that's destroying the family, then maybe the family was already pretty fragile." "You know it's more than that. You knew exactly what you were doing when you posted that picture." "You're right. I did know what I was doing. I was documenting the moment when I realized I would never be treated as an equal member of this family, no matter what I accomplished or how hard I tried." "But did you have to make it so public? Did you have to humiliate Mom like this?" That's when I realized something important. Uncle David wasn't calling because he was concerned about me or wanted to understand my perspective. He was calling because Grandma Margaret's public embarrassment was affecting his financial pipeline. "Uncle David, are you worried about me, or are you worried that Grandma Margaret might cut off your allowance?" There was a long silence. "That's what I thought. You've never cared about how she treated me before, and you don't care now. You're just worried that her being exposed as emotionally abusive might affect your meal ticket." "That's not fair, Haiti." "What's not fair is a 28-year-old woman spending her entire life wondering what she did to make her grandmother hate her, only to find out it was never about her at all. What's not fair is being excluded from family gifts and events because of an affair I had nothing to do with. What's not fair is a family that chose to protect everyone except the person who was hurt the most." Uncle David tried to argue, but I wasn't interested in debating with him. I told him that if he wanted to have a relationship with me, he needed to start by acknowledging that I had been treated unfairly. Until then, we didn't have much to talk about. 2 weeks after my original post, something unexpected happened. Grandma Margaret showed up at my apartment. I was shocked to see her standing at my door. She looked smaller than usual, older, and there was something in her expression I'd never seen before. It might have been vulnerability, but with her, it was hard to tell. "We need to talk," she said. I let her in, made tea, and we sat in my living room in awkward silence for a few minutes. Finally, she spoke. "I want you to know that I never intended for you to be hurt." I looked at her carefully. "But you did intend to exclude me from family gifts and events." "Yes." "And you did intend to treat me differently than Jake and Emma." "Yes." "Then how did you not intend for me to be hurt? What did you think the result would be?" She was quiet for a long time, staring down at her teacup. When she finally looked up, there were tears in her eyes. "I thought if I kept you at a distance, it would be easier." "Easier for who?" "For me, for everyone. I thought if I didn't get too attached to you, if I didn't treat you like my real granddaughter, then when the truth eventually came out, it wouldn't hurt as much." I felt my anger rising. "So, you decided to hurt me for 28 years, to protect yourself from potential future pain." "I know how it sounds, Haiti. I know it was wrong. But when I looked at you, all I could see was the affair that nearly destroyed my son's marriage. All I could think about was how your existence was proof of Linda's betrayal." "I was a baby, Grandma. I didn't betray anyone." "I know that now. I've always known that, really. But I was so angry, and I didn't know how to separate my feelings about what happened from my feelings about you." We sat in silence again. I could see that she was struggling, but I wasn't ready to make this easy for her. "The post," she said finally. "It's caused quite a stir. I notice people are saying terrible things about me, about our family." "Are they saying anything that isn't true?" I asked. She looked at me sharply. "Some of it is true. Some of it is exaggerated." "Which parts are exaggerated?" Another long pause. "I suppose most of it is true." I was surprised by her honesty. I had expected her to come here and demand that I take down the post, maybe try to manipulate me with guilt or threats, but she seemed genuinely defeated. "What do you want from me, Grandma?" "I want to make this right." "How?" "I don't know. I was hoping you could tell me." I looked at this woman who had made my childhood so confusing and painful, who had withheld love and acceptance for reasons that had nothing to do with me. And I realized something surprising. I didn't hate her anymore. I felt sorry for her. Grandma, I don't think you can make this right. You can't give. Uncle Tony called me crying again, but this time it was relief. Haiti, when I saw Mom's comment, I realized that if she could find the courage to apologize publicly, then I could find the courage to face the consequences of my actions. He told me that he and Maria were going to marriage counseling to work through the affair and its aftermath. He also said he wanted to have a real relationship with me as my father if I was open to it. I know Robert will always be your dad in the ways that matter most, he said, but I'd like to be part of your life too, if you let me. Jake and Emma were over the moon about Grandma Margaret's apology. Emma called me sobbing. Haiti, I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself, and I'm so happy that Grandma finally did the right thing. Even Uncle David called to apologize for his previous conversation. I was so focused on protecting Mom that I didn't think about protecting you. That was wrong. My parents were relieved that the truth was finally out in the open. My mom, Linda, came over the day after Grandma Margaret's comment and cried in my living room. Haiti, I'm so sorry. I thought we were protecting you by keeping the secret, but we were really just protecting ourselves from having to face what we'd done. You deserve to know the truth, and you deserve to be loved and accepted regardless of how you came into this world. My dad, Robert, was characteristically straightforward. I'm proud of you for handling this whole situation with such grace and strength. You forced this family to confront some ugly truths, and that took real courage. But the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. Great Aunt Helen called me and said, Haiti, honey, you did something that none of us adults had the backbone to do. You stood up to Margaret and forced her to face the consequences of her actions. That took real guts, and I admire the hell out of you for it. The Instagram post stayed up, and it became something of a viral sensation. It was featured in articles about family dynamics, social media accountability, and the power of documentation. A few family therapy organizations reached out asking if I wanted to share my story as an example of how to handle family exclusion and emotional manipulation. I declined most of the media requests, but I did agree to one interview with a podcast about family relationships. I wanted to share my story because I realized that what happened to me wasn't unique. There are lots of people out there who feel excluded from their families for reasons they don't understand, and I wanted them to know they weren't alone. 6 months later, our family looks completely different than it did before that Easter lunch. Grandma Margaret and I have started having weekly coffee dates where we're slowly rebuilding our relationship. She's told me stories about her own childhood and the pain that shaped her into someone who controlled others through exclusion and manipulation. It doesn't excuse her behavior, but it helps me understand it. Uncle Tony and I are developing a relationship as father and daughter, which is strange but wonderful. He's teaching me about the construction business, and I'm helping him understand social media marketing for his company. Jake and Emma officially call me their sister now, and we're closer than we've ever been. My relationship with my parents has also deepened. Knowing the whole truth about my origins has actually brought us closer together. My dad and I talk openly about what it was like for him to raise a child who wasn't biologically his.